The thing about the galaxy, if one were to take a step back and really look at it with any degree of honest assessment, was that it ran on a very particular kind of logic. The kind of logic that said species evolved according to their environmental pressures, developed technology to overcome their weaknesses, and eventually stumbled into space with whatever cultural baggage they'd been carrying since their ancestors first figured out fire. It was neat. It was predictable. It made sense in those tedious 3-hour symposiums that every spacefaring civilization had to sit through at least once. And then humanity showed up and threw that entire framework into a trash compactor. The Terran Integration Zone had been established approximately 4 cycles ago, which was just enough time for the galaxy's various military powers to stop panicking about the newcomers and start getting curious. Humans, as it turned out, were diplomatically adequate, technologically enthusiastic, and possessed an alarming tendency to treat near-death experiences as anecdotes for social gatherings. They'd integrated into the broader galactic community with a kind of cheerful obliviousness that suggested either supreme confidence or a complete inability to read a room. Station Kepler 442b hung in the neutral space between the Terran colonies and the Velkari ascendancy, a gleaming monument to interspecies cooperation that looked impressive in the promotional materials and functioned as a perpetual headache for its administrators. Today, it was hosting a joint military exercise, which was diplomatic speak for, "Let's see what these newcomers can actually do before we commit to any binding defense treaties." The Velkari were, by any objective measure, the galaxy's premier military specialists. 3 meters of scaled, digitigrade precision, with eyes that could count individual atoms at 100 meters and reflexes that made computers look sluggish. They'd evolved on a world where predators could camouflage themselves down to the molecular level, which meant that Velkari children learned to shoot the wing off a gnat at birth, or they simply didn't make it to adulthood. Their entire society had crystallized around this single evolutionary pressure. If you couldn't hit what you were aiming at, you weren't aiming at anything for very long. Commander Vexthal stood in the observation deck of the station's primary training facility, his scales reflecting the harsh fluorescent lighting in patterns that suggested profound skepticism. He'd been briefed on human capabilities. He'd read the reports. He'd even sat through that excruciating presentation where a human diplomat had explained their concept of Murphy's Law, as though it were a legitimate military doctrine. None of it had been encouraging. They arrived 17 minutes ago. His tactical officer, Kreshenal, reported with the kind of tone that suggested someone had tracked mud into a clean house. 3 transport. Shuttles. Minimal escort. The security scans detected approximately 47 separate small arms among their delegation. 47 weapons for a diplomatic military exchange? Vexithal's crest flared slightly. That's either paranoia or poor planning. The scans indicated most of them were personal sidearms. Apparently humans have a cultural practice called concealed carry that... I don't want to know. Vexthal cut him off. He'd learned early that asking humans to explain their cultural practices inevitably led to answers that created more questions. Is the range prepared? Configured to Velkari military standards. Targets at distances ranging from 500 to 3,000 meters. Variable wind conditions. Rotating gravitational fields. We've included every variable that our finest marksmen train against. Excellent. Vexithal allowed himself a small display of satisfaction. Let's see how Earth's soldiers measure up against actual military precision. The thing was, the Velkari weren't trying to be cruel. They were, in their own way, attempting to be helpful. Every new species that joined the galactic community needed to understand where they stood in the grand hierarchy of capabilities. It prevented misunderstandings. It saved lives. If humanity couldn't match Valkyrie marksmanship standards, well, there were other roles they could fill. Supply chain management, perhaps. Cultural liaison positions. The galaxy needed all types. The range itself was an engineering marvel. A kilometer-long chamber that could simulate atmospheric conditions from 14 different homeworlds. Generate wind patterns that would make a hurricane look like a gentle breeze, and adjust local gravity on a whim. Targets materialized and vanished according to complex algorithms designed by the Valkyrie's finest tactical minds. It was the kind of facility that made elite soldiers weep with joy and average recruits weep with terror. Commander Jackson Okonkwo walked into this masterpiece of military engineering wearing cargo pants, a jacket that had definitely seen better decades, and an expression of mild interest that would have been more appropriate for a particularly unremarkable museum exhibit. He was flanked by two other humans in similar states of casual dress, neither of whom seemed particularly impressed by their surroundings. Vexthal descended from the observation deck to meet them, his scales shifting to diplomatic neutral colors. Commander Okonkwo, welcome to the Valkyrie Combined Arms Facility. We've prepared a comprehensive demonstration of military marksmanship standards. That's real nice of you. Okonkwo extended his hand in that peculiar human gesture of greeting. Impressive setup you've got here. Our finest marksmen train in this facility. Vexthal touched the human's hand briefly, still not entirely comfortable with the whole skin contact thing. We thought it would provide an excellent baseline for understanding combat capabilities. We've arranged for a friendly competition, your best snipers against ours. A competition? Okonkwo's face did something that humans called a smile, which could mean anything from genuine pleasure to imminent violence. Sure, we can do that. Excellent. If you'll call forward your sniper unit, we can begin the demonstration. Vexthal gestured toward the range, where 3 Valkyrie marksmen stood at attention, their custom weapons gleaming with the kind of maintenance that bordered on religious devotion. Oh, we don't really have a sniper unit. Okonkwo said this the way someone might mention they'd forgotten to pick up milk at the store. The silence that followed had weight to it. You don't have snipers? Kreshenal spoke up from behind Vexthal, his translator struggling slightly with the concept. I mean, we have people who can shoot. Okonkwo shrugged, a gesture that humans use to express everything from uncertainty to complete indifference. We just don't really specialize it the way you're thinking. It's more of a general skill set. Vexthal felt his scales shift toward confused orange. General skill set. Marksmanship is a general skill set for your military? For our military, sure, but also for, people. Okonkwo glanced at one of his companions, a woman who looked like she might be considering a nap. Back home, shooting is kind of a recreational thing. Kids learn it in school sometimes, or from their parents. Weekends, holidays, that sort of thing. Recreation. Vexthal repeated the word carefully, as though it might explode. Yeah, for fun. Like, there's probably a couple 100,000 places on Earth where you can just show up and shoot targets for an afternoon. Ranges, clubs, hunting grounds. My grandmother used to take me shooting beer cans off fence posts when I was 8. Good times. The Valkyrie delegation exchanged glances that, had they been human, would have been accompanied by nervous laughter. In Valkyrie body language, they translated to approximately, "Is this species insane, or are we having a collective translator malfunction?" So, when you say you can participate in this marksmanship competition, Vexthal spoke slowly, carefully. You're suggesting that you'll use Recreational shooters? I'm suggesting I'll use whoever's available. Okonkwo turned to survey the humans who'd accompanied him. There were perhaps a dozen of them, all looking supremely unconcerned about the situation. Hey, anybody feel like shooting some targets? It's been a slow week. 3 hands went up immediately. A 4th joined them after a moment's consideration. Perfect. Okonkwo pointed at the first 3. You, and you. Show these folks what you've got. The first volunteer was a man who introduced himself as Mitchell Hammond, formerly of Cleveland, Ohio, currently working as a civilian contractor handling supply logistics for the Terran diplomatic mission. He had the kind of soft middle that suggested desk work and regular meals, wore glasses that probably should have been replaced 2 years ago, and carried himself with the energy of someone who'd rather be literally anywhere else. So, what are we shooting at? Mitchell asked, squinting at the range. Targets will appear at various distances and environmental conditions. Kreshnal had pulled up a holographic display that showed the range configuration, beginning at 500 meters, escalating to 3,000. You'll have 30 seconds to acquire and eliminate each target before it cycles. 3,000 meters? Mitchell whistled, which was a human sound that could express anything from appreciation to alarm. That's pretty far. It is the standard engagement distance for Velkari military operations. Vexthal tried not to sound condescending and failed spectacularly. If this is beyond your capabilities, now I can do it. Just haven't shot anything past 1,000 in a while. Might be rusty. Mitchell accepted a rifle from one of the range attendants, examined it with the casual interest of someone inspecting a new kitchen appliance, and made a few adjustments to the scope. This is nice hardware. Little heavy for my taste, but I can work with it. The first target materialized at 500 meters, a standard humanoid silhouette that would have been challenging for an average shooter under perfect conditions. The range computer had generated a crosswind at 15 meters per second and reduced the local gravity by 0.3 standard. Mitchell took approximately 4 seconds to settle into a shooting position that would have given a Velkari instructor an aneurysm. His stance was loose. His grip looked almost casual, and he appeared to be having a conversation with one of the other humans while he lined up the shot. So I told him, I said, "Steve, you can't expense a jet ski as office equipment." And he just... The rifle fired. 3,000 meters away, the target's center mass exploded in a shower of reactive particles. Looked at me like I was the one being unreasonable. Can you believe that? Mitchell worked the bolt action with the kind of muscle memory that spoke of thousands of repetitions. Anyway, what's next? The second target appeared at 1,200 meters, this time with rotating gravitational fields and atmospheric interference that simulated a Category 4 hurricane. Mitchell hummed something that might have been a song from Earth's radio charts, adjusted his aim by what appeared to be pure instinct, and fired. Direct hit. Okay, that's interesting. Kreshnal was furiously taking notes on his datapad. The wind compensation he used shouldn't have worked with that projectile velocity. The math doesn't... Target 3, 1,800 meters. Reduced visibility. Gravitational shear that would throw off most computer-guided systems. Mitchell scratched his nose, shifted his weight, and fired without any apparent use of the range's targeting data. Perfect hit. "I'm sorry," Vexithal heard himself say, "but how exactly are you calculating these shots?" Calculating? Mitchell looked genuinely confused by the question. "I'm not really doing math, if that's what you mean. I just kind of, point at it." "You point at it." Vexithal's scales had shifted to a color that didn't exist in standard Velkari emotional ranges. His medical officer would later identify it as existential crisis yellow. Well, yeah. I mean, you get a feel for it after a while. Wind, gravity, distance. It's all just kind of intuitive once you've done it enough times. Mitchell handed the rifle back to the attendant. That was fun. Haven't had a good shoot in weeks. The second volunteer was a woman named Patricia Chen, who explained that she ran an agricultural operation on one of the Terran colony worlds and had learned to shoot handling pest control on her farm. She was wearing boots that had visible mud on them and a jacket that advertised something called Johnson's Feed Supply. What kind of pests require marksmanship at 3,000 meters? Crescenal asked, his scientific curiosity overriding his growing sense of horror. Oh, these don't. Most of the varmints I deal with are close-range stuff, 500-600 meters tops. Patricia accepted a different rifle, held it up to the light, and frowned. This barrel's not quite straight. You got another one? The Velkari armorer, who had personally calibrated that weapon to tolerances measured in nanometers, made a sound like a tea kettle achieving sentience. Patricia's shooting style was, if anything, more disturbing than Mitchell's. She fired from positions that violated every principle of marksmanship that the Velkari had developed over 10,000 years of military evolution. She took one shot standing on one leg. She took another while apparently distracted by a conversation about grain prices with one of the other humans. She took a third shot at the maximum range while eating something she'd pulled from her pocket. Every single shot was dead center. I don't understand. Vexithal wasn't sure if he was speaking to Okonkwo or to the universe itself. She's not even using the targeting computer. She's not calculating wind resistance. She's not compensating for the Coriolis effect of the station's rotation. She's just shooting. Yeah, that sounds about right. Okonkwo had his arms crossed, looking pleased in the way humans did when they were proven correct about something. Like I said, general skill set. The third volunteer was a man who introduced himself as Robert Fisher, a school teacher from somewhere called Montana. He had the kind of patient demeanor that suggested he'd spent years explaining basic concepts to distracted teenagers, and he handled the rifle with the casual competence of someone who'd been shooting since before he could spell his own name. What do you teach? Crescenal asked, apparently, having decided that if he was going to watch his entire understanding of marksmanship collapse, he might as well gather data. History and physical education mostly. Sometimes I help out with the shooting club after school. You have school children learning this? Vexithal heard his voice climb an octave. Well, yeah. It's part of the curriculum in a lot of places. Gun safety, basic marksmanship, that kind of thing. Some kids are really into it, compete in tournaments and stuff. Others just learn enough to pass the practical exam and move on to other interests. Robert settled into a shooting position. What's the target spread looking like? Full randomization. Crescenal pulled up the controls. Targets will appear anywhere in the range, with no warning. Multiple environmental variables, maximum difficulty. Sounds good. What followed was less a demonstration of skill and more a casual dismantling of everything the Velkari thought they knew about ballistic physics. Robert fired from positions that should have been impossible. He compensated for variables that the range computer hadn't even activated yet. At one point, he took a shot at a target that was briefly visible through a gap in the environmental shielding for exactly 0.7 seconds, while the station's rotation created a gravitational anomaly that would have thrown off a guided missile. He hit it. Okay, I have to ask. Vexithal approached Robert as the teacher was finishing his demonstration. How are you doing this? What technology are you using? What enhancements? Enhancements? Robert looked down at himself. I've got reading glasses and a knee brace from a skiing accident. That's about it. But the calculations, the predictive modeling, Commander, I don't think you understand. Okonkwo stepped forward, his expression somewhere between sympathetic and amused. Humans don't really calculate this stuff. We just do it. It's pattern recognition, muscle memory, spatial awareness. Our brains are really, really good at tracking moving objects and predicting trajectories. That's impossible. The processing power required is apparently built into our standard neurology. Okonkwo shrugged. Look, our ancestors survived by chasing animals across open plains until the animals collapsed from exhaustion. We threw rocks at prey from 100 meters away. We tracked herds across entire continents using footprints and guesswork. Our entire evolutionary history is basically one long exercise in see thing, hit thing. We're persistence predators with opposable thumbs and an overdeveloped sense of pattern recognition. Shooting is just an extension of that. But your civilian population can do this? Kreshenal was still taking notes, though his hands were shaking slightly. Not just military specialists, but average citizens? I mean, not everyone's into it. Plenty of humans can't shoot worth a damn, or they just don't care about learning. But yeah, a significant percentage of our population has at least basic marksmanship training. It's cultural. Some places on Earth, kids grow up shooting. Other places, it's something you pick up as an adult. Hunting, sports shooting, historical reenactment, competitions. There's like a million different ways humans engage with marksmanship as a hobby. Patricia raised her hand. I do trick shooting competitions on weekends. You know, shooting targets behind your back using mirrors, hitting multiple targets in rapid sequence, that kind of thing. I was on my university's rifle team, Mitchell added. We placed third in the nationals, lost to a bunch of kids from Texas who could shoot the wings off flies at 600 meters. I coached the youth shooting league back home. Robert said this with the same energy someone might use to discuss coaching Little League baseball. We've got kids as young as 10 who can outshoot most adults. It's really just about practice and patience. Vexithal felt something fundamental shift in his understanding of the galaxy. When you say shooting is recreational, you mean your children compete in marksmanship tournaments the way other species compete in mathematics, athletics? Both, actually. An art, music, debate, you name it. Okonkwo started counting on his fingers. There's the Junior Olympics, which has shooting events. The International Shooting Sports Federation runs youth programs. Most schools that offer shooting programs treat it like any other extracurricular activity. My niece won her state championship when she was 14. Beat out 200 other kids for the title. Your niece? Vexthal repeated. A child. She's 17 now. Probably better than I am at this point. Kids pick things up fast. Kreshenal was frantically pulling up data on his tablet. The human delegation has 12 members present. How many of them can shoot at this level? Okonkwo glanced around at his people. Show of hands. Who's comfortable with precision shooting at 1,000 meters or more? 10 hands went up. The two who didn't were arguing with each other about whether 1,000 meters really counted as long distance, or if that was just medium range with attitude. And this is a representative sample of human capabilities? Vexithal already knew the answer, but he asked anyway because some part of him desperately needed confirmation that reality was, in fact, this absurd. Representative? I don't know about that. Okonkwo scratched his chin. I mean, I picked mostly people who I knew could shoot because I figured that's what you were asking for. But if you pulled a random sample of, say, 1,000 humans from Earth, you'd probably get, 300 who can shoot well, 400. 40% of your species has military-grade marksmanship capabilities. Vexathal said this slowly, carefully, the way someone might describe finding out their house was built on an active volcano. Military-grade seems like a strong term. I'd say competent amateur. Real professionals are a different breed entirely. Okonkwo pulled out a small data pad. Actually, you want to see something fun? This is footage from the National Precision Rifle competition we held last month. That's the civilian league, not military. The video showed a human woman, 63 years old according to the caption, firing at targets so far away that the Valkyrie range computer couldn't even display them properly. She was shooting from positions that defied physics, compensating for a wind that would have grounded aircraft, and doing it all while apparently carrying on a conversation with a judge about her grandchildren. She didn't miss a single shot. That's Agnes Kowalski, retired postal worker from Wisconsin. She's placed in the top 10 at nationals for the last 6 years running. Okonkwo said this with obvious pride. There's probably 10,000 people at that competition. Most of them could walk onto this range right now and outshoot your best marksman without breaking a sweat. That's not possible. But Vexthal's voice lacked conviction. It's extremely possible, and I've got about 50 years of competition records to prove it. Humans shoot, Commander. It's what we do. Some of us are better at it than others, but the baseline capability is just there, built in, part of the package. Patricia cleared her throat. If it makes you feel any better, we're also really good at throwing things. My cousin holds the javelin record for her region, 97 meters with a running start. That's pretty much just weaponized evolution, too. Weaponized evolution. Vexathal repeated the phrase like a prayer, or perhaps a curse. Yeah, you know how it goes. Humans evolved as endurance hunters who threw projectiles at prey that couldn't climb trees or swim rivers. We walked across continents tracking animals by scent and footprints. We threw spears, rocks, whatever we could grab. Our brains got really good at calculating trajectories on the fly because if you couldn't hit a gazelle from 50 meters away, you didn't eat. Mitchell was clearly warming to the topic. Then we invented guns, which are basically just rocks that go faster, and suddenly all that evolutionary hardware had a new application. We've been shooting things for pleasure and profit ever since. For pleasure. Vexathal's scales had achieved a color that his species used to indicate the universe had stopped making sense. Look, I know this is weird from your perspective. Okonkwo's tone shifted to something more diplomatic. The Valkyrie evolved on a world where precision was survival. You needed perfect accuracy or you died. So your entire species specialized into these incredible marksmen, and you built your military doctrine around that strength. It makes sense. It's logical. But humans, Vexathal prompted. Humans evolved on a world where persistence was survival. We didn't need to be perfect. We just needed to be good, enough and stubborn enough to keep trying. So we developed this general-purpose adaptability. We're not the best at any one thing, but we're pretty good at almost everything. And shooting? Okonkwo gestured at the range, where scorch marks from the demonstration still smoked slightly. Shooting just happens to align really well with our particular evolutionary skill set. It's pattern recognition, spatial awareness, hand-eye coordination, and the ability to make rapid unconscious calculations, all things humans do naturally. But you teach it recreationally. Kreshnal was still stuck on this point, his scientific mind refusing to accept the implications. Your children learn this as a hobby. Some children, not all. But yeah, it's a hobby for millions of people on Earth. Sports shooting, hunting, competitive leagues, historical reenactment societies. There's an entire industry built around civilian marksmanship. Guns, ammunition, accessories, training courses. People spend their weekends at ranges the way other species might spend them at art galleries or sporting events. And your military? Vexathal had to ask. If these are your civilians, what are your actual soldiers capable of? Okonkwo's smile could have cut glass. Commander, that's not really a question you want answered during a friendly demonstration. The silence that followed was broken only by the soft hum of the station's environmental systems. I think, Vexathal said carefully, that we may need to reconsider some of our initial assessments regarding human military capabilities. That seems wise. Okonkwo glanced at his datapad. Although, if you really want to understand human marksmanship culture, you should visit Earth sometime. I can arrange a tour of some of the major shooting facilities. There's this place in Texas that has a range that goes out to 2 miles. They hold competitions there every summer. Last year's winner was a grandmother who learned to shoot during World War III. She hit a target the size of a dinner plate at 3,000 meters in a crosswind that would have blown your scales off. World War III, Vexathal repeated numbly. Yeah, Earth history gets a little messy in the mid-21st century. We worked it out, though. Built some character as a species. Okonkwo checked the time. Anyway, if there's nothing else, my people need to get back to the station's civilian sector. Patricia's got a shipment of agricultural supplies coming in. Mitchell needs to file some reports, and Robert's teaching a virtual class in about 3 hours. Of course. Vexathal managed something approximating a diplomatic farewell. Thank you for the demonstration. Anytime, Commander. And hey, if you ever want to try shooting human style, let me know. We've got spare gear and plenty of patience. It's really not that hard once you get the hang of it. The humans filed out, their casual conversation about weekend plans and dinner preferences echoing in the cavernous range facility. Vexathal watched them go, his mind attempting to process what he'd just witnessed. Sir, Kreshnal approached cautiously. Should I update the tactical assessment files on human capabilities? Update them to what? Entire species is apparently born with military-grade marksmanship skills that they use primarily for entertainment purposes? Vexathal's crest flared in frustrated disbelief. How do you quantify that? How do you plan around that? I don't know, sir. Neither do I. Vexathal pulled up his communication array. Get me a line to Central Command, and pull every file we have on human evolution, culture, and recreational activities. All of them? All of them. If they treat precision shooting as a hobby, I want to know what they consider actual military training. The answer to that question, when it eventually arrived through official channels, was somehow worse than Vexathal had imagined. Human military training included such cheerful activities as survival in hostile environments, close quarters combat with improvised weapons, advanced strategic planning under conditions of extreme stress, and something called psychological warfare, that the Velkari Diplomatic Corps had quietly requested not be explained in detail. But that was a concern for later. Right now, Vexathal stood in his empty range, staring at the targets that a civilian logistics coordinator, a farmer, and a schoolteacher had destroyed with the kind of casual competence that should have required decades of specialized military training. Sir? Kreshnal ventured after several minutes of silence. What should I tell the other Ascendancy worlds about human marksmanship capabilities? Vexthal considered the question. He thought about the grandmother with the javelin. He thought about children competing in shooting tournaments. He thought about 10,000 civilians gathering for competitions that would qualify as advanced military exercises by Velkari standards. Tell them, he said finally, that humanity has successfully weaponized recreation, and we should probably avoid making them angry. Is that the official assessment? That's the only assessment that makes sense. Vexithal's scales shifted to resigned purple. Also, cancel the rest of the military capability demonstrations. I don't think my sanity can handle finding out what else they consider a casual hobby. 3 weeks later, the updated Velkari military handbook included a new section on human capabilities. It was dense, technical, and filled with the kind of cautionary language usually reserved for documenting the behavior of apex predators. The section on marksmanship began with a simple warning. Do not assume limitations based on civilian status. Human recreational shooting standards exceed most species' military requirements. Approach all humans as potentially capable of precision fire at extreme range. This is not paranoia. This is pattern recognition. Somewhere on Earth, Agnes Kowalski was teaching her great-grandchildren how to shoot tin cans off a fence post at 200 meters, explaining that if they practiced real hard, maybe they'd make it to nationals next year. Her 8-year-old great-grandson landed 3 shots in a row and asked if they could try for 300 meters next weekend. She said yes, because that's just what people did. The galaxy continued turning, blissfully unaware that somewhere in the administrative offices of 14 different alien military organizations, procurement officers were quietly updating their threat assessment matrices and wondering what other human hobbies they should be worried about.